Alright, we are recording for Chapter 5 of Undiscovered Country. Chapter 6, Undiscovered Country. There's some interesting stuff here. Interesting changes from the movie. One key thing, though, that I'll get to shortly. It's, I think, one of the earlier highlights, but anyway. First highlight, though, I have here is right at the beginning. I have a number of things highlighted on the first page. Chang, his contorted features bathed in amber glow, screamed at Kirk in his native language. The visual went abruptly, ominously dark. Finger to her earpiece, Uhura swung toward the Khan. He says we fired on them in a blatant act of war. So in the movie, the view screen just translates it. Or he was speaking in English or whatever. But it's just, I find it interesting here that we are having it indicate that the main viewer doesn't always translate. Which may help later on when they try to sneak by and it's like, we can't use the universal translator, it would be detected. It's like that, it might be setting up for that, but it still is just an interesting idea for the possibility here that it's not, that the universal translator is not always active, that it also isn't like on their person and just working always, including through the, like, viewer says something, different language, but you have your own that doesn't know it's a her that has to manage this. Yeah, I do find that curious. We do get Spock saying, according to the databank, we have Captain twice, that they have fired. And then it's the Kronos rights itself and is preparing to attack, so Kirk has to decide what to do. Chekhov asking, bring the shields up. Valeris also asking. Excuse me. They also have this. And this is largely from Kirk's perspective, by the way. Juan Suarez's words echoed meaninglessly in his mind. Out of nowhere, the shots fired out of nowhere. The shots fired out of nowhere. At the moment, Chang wasn't willing to listen. Something drastic had to be done to get the Klingons' attention, to convince them that Kirk had not given the order to fire. So two main things there. One is Kirk is surrendering specifically to just get their attention. He's not necessarily like, yes, I will surrender myself kind of thing. That is what ends up happening. But it is, we got to figure out what the hell's going on. And he needs their help to do that. So yeah, we need to not be destroyed. But also I do find it interesting him thinking about the out of nowhere thing about the attack on Themis. So to him it's meaningless, but I know, because of watching the movie, that this was most likely the cloaked bird of prey. Well, the bird of prey that can fire while cloaked that actually launched the torpedoes. It just placed itself nearby the Enterprise and did this. Yeah, which that also explains the neutron surge. But then also don't forget that it did set up that potentially it could have been a couple photon torpedoes that were armed and aimed that were producing neutron surge, which technologically that makes no sense, but still. Yeah, so he orders the surrender. Her is confused by this. Chekhov protests with the whole captain if they fired us with our shields down. He calls up Scotty to find out, did we fire? Negative, Captain, Scott's voice replied. According to inventory, was still fully loaded. Kirk felt only infinitesimal relief. At least his ship wasn't responsible for the damage to the Klingon vessel, but it remained for him to convince Chang of that. Spock frowned as he checked the information on his viewer. Databanks reconfirm, Captain. 2 photon torpedoes fired. So that is also important because I do find it interesting. Kirk doesn't recognize that, wait a minute, that means that somehow the databanks have been altered. Spock, though, likely immediately thought of that. He does point it out later, after their arrest and Cronus 1 leaves them. That it's like either, well, how did he put it? Either the assassins are there, or at minimum, basically just point, it doesn't matter what evidence we have here. We know if it's of the assassins themselves, of whoever fired the torpedoes, it doesn't matter. We know we've got the person on board who changed the databanks. We need to find them. So, yeah, it is interesting. It's just, I know I'm kind of fumbling with my tongue here, but it still is, we're getting those more of those clues and trying to build us all up. And it will be interesting to see what all is and is not red herrings. Well, I don't consider some of it red herrings. To me, a red herring actually is confusing you versus it just being information that turns out not being relevant, such as the photon torpedo thing. Them being a potential source of the neutron surge. That, I think is just wrong, but even if we take it as true, it's like, that is evidence that just isn't necessary. It doesn't prove relevant, but it is part of the evidence. So now it's, Kirk's gonna go, when Spock gets in his way. I'm responsible for involving you in this, Captain. I will go. Kirk shook his head. I'm going. As captain, I have to convince them I didn't give the order to fire. Your presence wouldn't be half as convincing. Spock hovered, uncertain. Kirk continued. Besides, you're going to be responsible for getting me out of this. Meantime, he lowered his voice, we're not going to be the instigators of full-scale war on the eve of universal peace. I'm glad that they took out the I'm going. As captain, I have to convince them I didn't give the order to fire. I'm glad they cut that out in the movie. Just the whole, I'm responsible for involving you in this, Captain. I will go. You'll be responsible for getting me out of this. That's a much better response there. Then we cut to Cronus 1 following Chang. And it is interesting because it takes longer for gravity to be restored on the ship, and it is a very gruesome scene. But we also get this line here that it is Chang's point of view, and this does kind of confuse me. Chang did not shrink from the sight of all the wounded and dead and such. As a warrior, he had long ago learned to accept the cost of battle, but for this, he promised himself grimly, Kirk would have to die. So I find this curious, because in the movie, we know that Chang is one of the conspirators. He's part of this. So either we have the narrator straight up lying, which I do have a problem with that. I don't think, even for something like, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. To me, the best way to write, in my opinion, because I've not really done this, I've not really written a story like this, but the best way to write a conspiracy where you are also following one of the conspirators is you need to ensure that the narrator is always telling the truth. Not telling everything, but always telling the truth. So that way, at the end, you can reread it and it's like, oh, I never realized this. And it's like, oh, in this context, now I understand. Yeah. So for this, where we are getting seemingly Chang is just straight up lying, that's like, I'll get Kirk for this. It's like he had nothing to do with it, and you know that. So I got an issue there. And sometimes I talk about anime and manga. One of them, Fullmetal Alchemist, there's a scene where a guy who is part of a conspiracy is seen like visibly shaking at a funeral. And was getting from somebody else's perspective, and does seem like he's upset because the loss of somebody, and also that the dude's daughter is crying. And so it just seems like he's being affected by this. But later, when he's actually challenged, how can you possibly look down on humans? I mean, it's like, I saw you doing this. I saw you trembling. Then he was like, no, I was trembling in rage that his daughter wouldn't shut up. And it's like, that's a good way to do it, where everything that has been stated is true. He was observed trembling like that. The interpretation of it was wrong. Yeah, and then it is revealed, and you see how really bad a guy it is. But that's I've been watching through that recently. That's why it came to mind. But that's what I mean by how I think it would be best done here. That it is, everything is true that the narrator is telling you. It's just not all the information. But also to help give a perspective on how gruesome this is. I didn't highlight it, but I'm still going to read it. So Chang has been going through and has actually gotten to the stateroom. Gravity's still off, so he's having to use handholds and all that to go. The lights flickered. Chang lurched suddenly, jerked downward in the grip of an invisible giant as Cronus's gravity returned. He fell to his knees and bowed his head beneath the thunderous downpour of bodies and blood. And there's more. Like, there were limbs strewn about, people cut in half. It's really intense, far more so than what's in the movie, which makes me wonder if they had the money or just more advanced special effects, like late 90s, even early 2000s. That would have been interesting. It would not have been a PG movie, though. But it is also they describe when Kirk and McCoy get into the room, when they see it, it's not only you've got the bodies and body parts all around, but it's like all the furniture has blood over it. There's blood on the ceilings because of how much got thrown about and there being no gravity, so it can't hit the ceilings. It is just horrible. So as Burr was in her quarters, she's finally she struggles to get out. Finally, gravity turns on, and she's also thrown down. But she scrambles up and just goes, completely ignoring all the like personal possessions and such in her stateroom, falling down. It's like, nope, have to get to her father. And she's even angry that she needs to be there. She's angry about the whole not accepting that she would continue after him, which. Okay, so because of how I feel I have to talk here, because of how I criticized with The Final Frontier, how I despised the cliche of people thinking that, in what I was describing with Scotty, that because he was over-disciplining Peter, and that was the last thing that he had done to Peter when Peter died, and they think, oh, that means, I hate that cliche. I think it's a stupid cliche. Because there's no reason for Peter to believe that. He knows he loved him, Scotty. He knows that because you've loved him since he was born. I mean, it's not a problem. So is she doing that as well? I don't think so. I don't think that this cliche applies there. Because she's upset that she didn't tell her father, yes, if you die, I will succeed you. I will carry on after you. She refused to accept that responsibility. Kind of a not accepting that he would die. But I don't, and now she's upset that potentially he's going to die and she can't tell him that. Also that she's not going to be there to die before him because she would rather she die than him. But it's still, I don't consider this a example of the cliche because it's not a question of whether or not there was love between them. It's a question of he asked her to do something and she did not promise to do it. She also didn't say she wouldn't. She just would not promise to do it. So that is different, because that is a singular, specific thing, not a, does he know I love him kind of thing. It's like, no, he knows that. There was nothing she has been demonstrated doing that would ever allow Gorkon or anyone to believe she did not love him. So it's not an example of that cliche. It is just similar. It does seem parallel, but it's not. It's not. All right. Okay, she hasn't gotten to the room yet. This was an outright attack by a hostile vessel. A Romulan warbird, perhaps, laying waste to both Kronos and Enterprise, then stealing away to leave the Empire and the Federation to accuse each other. And this is what she thinks first when trying to rush there. Well, she also thinks about how Curler's words of trying to protect them. It's like, if this was just, some like court intrigue stuff, that might work, but we're on it. It's a whole nother game, Curler, so it's like. But anyway, continue with this. Or was Captain Kirk so insane with hatred and grief that he would fire unprovoked on the Klingons? Impossible, or so her father would say. Too trusting, father, you are too trusting. She did not trust Kirk, but she had expected greater cunning from him, not a blatant attack. So even though she still criticizes her father with trusting Kirk, it still is, even she does, that's not where she goes first, and she wouldn't think that Kirk would do this. So it's just, I appreciate that because, for one thing, it both demonstrates that she is different from the Warriors. Both Curler and Chang are blaming Kirk. Just gut reaction kind of stuff. And very, very violent reaction as well for them. But she isn't. She's thinking more about it and recognize this doesn't make sense. So it does. Well, basically, we're already getting the setup that at the end, you've restored my father's faith, kind of thing. That she can, in fact, be convinced of the truth that Kirk did not at least order this. So technically, and that is also one thing that I should have mentioned. Kirk is only talking about how I didn't give this order, I didn't give this order, I didn't give this order. He's not denying that the Enterprise fired it. He doesn't know the Enterprise didn't fire it necessarily. It's like the databanks say one thing, the inventory says another, so there's that issue, but it's still... But at least he can say didn't give the order, which is also important because later a point is made in the trial, at least in the movie. Chang is making the point that basically it doesn't matter if you gave the order or not. You're responsible for the actions of all of your crew. So if any one of them did it, you're still responsible. We still put you on trial. It's not completely accurate, but yeah. I mean, it just, that doesn't seem like justice, because that means that... that would not be justice, because the assassins, even if they are under his command, yes, he needs to be disciplined for failing in his command to prevent them. But assuming execution is what you do for the assassins, you'd execute the assassins, you wouldn't execute Kirk. That doesn't achieve anything. So, yeah, but still, punishing him would make sense by that logic, but it wouldn't make sense to execute him for it. Anyway. Yeah, so mention here when she gets there and is holding Gorkon. Chang is there. Curler is also there. They were both at him, next to his body. Where's the physician dead and sickbay is destroyed? We are searching for someone who can help, but can find no survivor with medical skills. This is when it then comes in that Kirk is coming over. He says Enterprise did not attack. They wish to offer help. He's bringing a doctor. Enterprise is undamaged? Then who attacked us as it burst? So again, she's not immediately going to being Kirk. Kirk lies, Chang said grimly. We did not monitor it. We were not expecting to be fired on by our escort. But there were no other vessels in this quadrant, and the trajectory of the photon torpedo is clear. Enterprise fired them. So, for one thing, there's a contradiction here that I just realized. It's like, we did not monitor it, but we know the trajectory. Possibly a little guilty knowledge there. But it's also, why wouldn't you be monitoring? I mean, that doesn't make sense. For what the Kronos one is, things should have sensors that just never turn off. I mean, they should be monitoring continuously. Enterprise should also be monitoring continuously. Because the mission is inherently dangerous, escort or not. So yeah, that seems silly, but anyhow. Curler pulled himself to his feet swiftly, angrily. Let Kirk come. I will deal with him. No, as it burst said, her voice shrill with desperation. They have a doctor. Let my father be taken care of. Then we will deal with them. For a moment, Chang and Curler hesitated. Chang nodded. Curler spoke, his voice tight, grudging. I will return shortly. So it is... I highlighted that not because that technical issue. Well, not technical issue, the possible guilty knowledge. But that... as it burrs, how it shows us her priorities. They are her father first. Not vengeance, technically not justice, just her father first. And so let them come, then we'll deal with it. Because let's see if we can save him. And I do just find that interesting because it helps set up the separation between her and the military. Even though she and Curler love each other, they are still very different people. Chang is also very different, but there isn't such a personal connection there. Here's another thing that it is, in fact, a technical error. So this is after they've beamed aboard, and Curler he's ready to, kill them himself, but he does calm down enough to lead them on, and when going through the corridors, Kirk is shocked. And Curler does look, which I also do believe, just the way I always have read Curler from the movie, he is reasonable. Yes, he does have his passions, his warrior passions that can prove a problem here. But he's not a fool. That once he calms down, he would be able to think that, wait, this isn't how Kirk would do this. And he is shocked by what's gone on here. Because, Kirk even asking, are there any casualties? It's Curler could easily stop and realize, okay, even if he was lying, his reaction was not that of someone who expected the horror within the ship. So I do appreciate that, because it is building up that he might be able to also be one, like as a bird, to eventually realize this could not have been Kirk. But anyway, so they get to the room and see the situation. Chancellor Gorkon. McCoy rushed to him immediately. Jim, he's still alive. We get some more stuff here, but nothing talking about McCoy until we get to Jim. McCoy struggled to free himself from the grasp of the security guards to reach Gorkon. What security guards? I mean, that there are security guards isn't an issue, but there's been no mention of him being stopped before reaching Gorkon. All we get is he rushed to him immediately. It doesn't say he rushed to him immediately but was grabbed. No, it's just rushing, and apparently not. That I do have an issue with. Especially because, I mean, it's that far apart. Here's the rushing, he's being held. Plus there's the whole, as it were, even said they have a doctor bring him. I mean, it's like, why are you stopping this? But there's also this that might also be guilty knowledge, by the way. You know, what happened, you crippled our gravitational field with a direct torpedo hit, and 2 Starfleet crewmen beamed aboard in magnetic boots and did this. Chang roared with a sweep of his arm at the dead at Azatbur and Gorkon. We have witnesses. We haven't had anything that clearly indicates that Chang has been told that the magnetic boots we use. We have no indication of that. And there's also no indication of there being living witnesses at the moment either. Well, sort of. For the most part, it seems like everyone was killed. But there have been some mention that maybe there are some still alive, but it's not looking good. So it's like the whole, we have witnesses. Who are these witnesses? But that's unclear, but it still is a, who told you this? Hasn't been stated, so that could be guilty knowledge. It could just be not stated in the book, which does happen. Alright, Bones does what he can. There is the mention, by the way, of, where is it? His voice was steady, but his hands trembled, concerning Bones. So, when it's mentioned later in the trial that his hands were shaking, Chang tries to gin this up as you were intentionally incompetent. It's like, no, he was doing his best, and yeah, his hands shake a little bit. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to impair his ability. But in the movie, because you can't really tell if his hands are trembling or not, it could have just been Chang attacking him, going to ad hominem attacks, which would be in line with his character. But anyway, we get here where he's done all he can. The Chancellor opened his eyes and looked up into Jim's face. Are you all right? Gorkon asked feebly. Jim heard his own voice telling Spock, they're animals. Let them die. No, Jim tried to whisper. Don't let it end this way. The Chancellor's eyes dulled, his jaw slackened. I had to highlight that because the line in the movie that Gorkon has of don't let it end this way is a good line, and a very good final line for a character as well. So, yeah, but here, I understand why it is different, the are you all right? I understand that. But the fact that they're just giving the line to Kirk instead just feels weird. And also that he's not even saying it, not necessarily saying it loud. Maybe he did whisper, Jim tried to whisper. Well, no, Jim tried to whisper. It's like, so we don't even know if he actually said it aloud or not. But no, I do think that it is far better for Gorkon to have that line. But I do still appreciate the "Are you all right?" Which, assuming Ezra heard that, she could just dismiss that as how her father is, and that he was a fool for that. But it can also be taken as, no, this is him. This is Gorkon acknowledging himself. Kirk did not do this, and that he does not believe Kirk did this. So Then we get this line after Gorkin has died. From Chang, under Article 184 of Interstellar Law. I had to highlight just that because I wish it were written like it is in the movie. I'm pretty sure in the movie it's under Article 184 of your Interstellar Law, and he puts the emphasis on there. It's beautiful because of how Chang is basically just spitting on them with it. That it's not just that it is against the assassinations against the law, but it's your law. You're the hypocrites. You're the one who did it. I love it. It's such a good line. And Plummer does it perfectly. Oh, man. You wouldn't think from some of the other stuff that he did, like Sound of Music, you wouldn't necessarily think Christopher Plummer would be such a good Klingon. But he does it great. He was the perfect actor for it. Yes. Maybe because of mentioning Max von Sydow in another one of these. Maybe a young Max von Sydow. But Christopher Plummer still did it perfect. Alright, okay, and then there's this, which is final highlight. And some of this, the one aspect of it, in context, I'm good with it. Out of context, more broadly, but let me get to that. So this is they've been taken out, so it's, as it were, Curler and Chang are in the room. Potentially also some security guards, but they don't talk, so they don't count. Chang knelt beside them at Gorkin's head and carefully raised the Chancellor's eyelids with his thumbs. Oh, wait, hang on. Oh, hang on. Let me start over. I should have made the highlight a little earlier. Even in the repose of death, his expression showed exhaustion and strain. As it were, gently smoothed the traces of weariness away, then started as Curler's hands appeared on either side of Gorkin's face. Chang knelt beside them at Gorkin's head. Chang knelt beside them at Gorkin's head and carefully raised the Chancellor's eyelids with his thumbs. A rumble started low in Curler's throat. No, Azabur pushed their hands away. She knew what they intended, to send her father into the afterlife in a manner befitting a warrior. With a cry that warned the dead of his coming, Curler and Chang regarded her with confusion. No, she repeated, steadying her voice. My father wanted peace. He was no warrior. I know his wishes. He came to break tradition, not keep it. Curler made a quick, furious movement as if to push past her and continue the ceremony without her permission. But Chang lifted an arm to hold him back. Do as she wishes, he said quietly. He stood and motioned for Curler to do likewise. The younger Klingon withdrew and stepped back, eyes ablaze with rage and sorrow. Chang's cold expression spoke of a hatred that ran very deep. So, I do like this. I do like this scene. I also find it interesting that Chang's cold expression spoke of a hatred that ran very deep. Hatred of Gorkin? Not sure. But the thing that, in this context, I get it. Her statement of, he came to break tradition, not keep it, entirely appropriate. But, in the larger sense, like stepping back, seeing how it applies more broadly, now, because that's, and that, the chapter's done now. In the larger sense, like Gorkin being a High Chancellor and viewing it that way, that would not work. Klingon culture is deeply important to them. Klingon tradition is deeply important to them. I think that what would make sense, though, for him, like, not him coming to break it, but instead him coming to just not make it necessary. That's like, no, you don't need to do stuff like this. You can choose to do it. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is not necessary. We don't need to so ritualize death and battle and war. We don't need to do that anymore. Because when we ritualize it, we risk elevating it. We need to elevate peace. Our goal needs to be peace. And just that I can see. But that's a larger, what is his actual philosophy for the Klingon Empire? If it's a came to break tradition, not keep it. But yeah, I mean, but for right here, as it were, challenging them, it's a good line. Good line. All right. Well, hang on. I guess I do want to quickly see what do we got for. Okay, so it is. We just start with the on the bridge where the senior officers have gathered, which really just means that Scotty's come up. I mean, Chekhov, Uhura, Spock, and Scotty are the only senior officers on the ship that we know of. So Scotty came up, and Uhura just reports that they've been arrested for the assassination of Gorgon. Yeah. Haven't really got much more to say. I'm looking forward to the next part. Enjoying the chapter still. Enjoy the chapter still. So yeah. Really, it's just the two things that have me concerned. Well, one concern, the technical error of did McCoy rush to Gorgon or not? And then the other is actually, wait, did I even say that? The whole I don't like with Chang that we're potentially having the narrator lie to us about Chang's feelings. I don't remember if I said it or not. I did put it in the notes. If it actually turns out that the conspiracy was much smaller and that Chang wasn't involved with it yet, but he comes to be involved, like some other people kill Gorka, but then Chang and some others start involving themselves later on, being brought into it, and it just grows from there. I'd be okay with that. If the growth is handled properly, I'm okay with that. But that's not necessarily where we are at the moment. So, yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it goes. But I don't like the idea of the narrator lying. You just don't give full context. You don't give the full information. Just appearances. Appearances are good. Appearances are how you can trick people. I mean, it's just. Where is it? Pretty sure it's in this stack, isn't it? Maybe it's a different one. The Usual Suspects is an example of a faulty narrator. But the thing is, in that, the narrator is a character who has a reason to lie. In this, the narrator is the author of the book. It's like the view that we're following the book. So the observation can be false. Like I mentioned in the Fullmetal Alchemist manga, the observation can be misinterpreted. That's fine. So that's the way to do it. But this was, no, we're in Chang's head. We're getting his own thoughts. Is he thinking falsely? That doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. All right. See you next time.